Jesse, how you doing? Thank you for taking time to be on the Bitcoin Source. Can we start things off by introducing yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Jesse Berger. I'm the author of Magic Internet Money, a book about Bitcoin, which I published in October of 2020. And prior to that, I worked in finance and wealth management for a little over a decade.
Great. Jesse, usually on the Bitcoin Source, the first question that I ask my guest is like, where did they source their Bitcoin knowledge from? So my question to you is, whether it be books, courses, or conferences, what kind of inspired you to become like a Bitcoiner?
Yeah, I would say I pieced my knowledge of Bitcoin together over time. I was introduced to it at a couple of different stages for a couple of different at a couple different intervals, I would say, in my career. I first came across it in 2010 or 2011, mostly because I remember Max Kaiser talking about it, and I was following Max back then on the gold and silver, on the precious metals trade. And I remember very vividly learning three key things: that Bitcoin had that fixed absolute limit, that it was issued on a predetermined schedule, and that there was the mining element, meaning there was no free money. All coins came at a cost. And that was very important to me, having just come off the financial crisis, because I started my career basically at the beginning of the financial crisis. So I learned about it back then, but I was a dumb banker and didn't know how to buy it. And there was no infrastructure or anything back then. Came across, blockchain more broadly in 2016 or so, or 2015, 2016. Learned through Dan Tapscott had that Blockchain Revolution book, which started to, there was a big buzz back then about blockchain. So I learned a little bit about it, but I didn't do anything about it, similar how I didn't do anything about buying Bitcoin back in 2011. And then finally in 2017, just through sort of dumb luck, got introduced to the world of exchanges, and had the opportunity to buy some, started buying some, actually set up a wallet. And once I made that first transaction where I sent it from an exchange to my wallet, that was like the big aha moment where it really started to click for me. And I had sort of put the puzzle pieces together of, okay, I understood the monetary element, and then the how it actually works really, came together for me, and I was just off and running from there.
Yeah, and that story kind of relates to me in a sense too, because when you said that you were just a dumb banker, I remember when I was when I was working in the financial realm, like I got introduced to Bitcoin in 2017. I was working for JP Morgan Chase, and then I moved to State Street Bank. But you're absolutely correct. Like the process and the way that people go about knowing about Bitcoin in the traditional finance legacy system is like no one wants to talk about it. It's very like taboo. I mean, it's changing now because, Fidelity and BlackRock and some of these other entities are getting in. But I can relate to that. Like in those early stages of Bitcoin, trying to talk to your colleagues about it was almost impossible.
Well, also, if you think about it, back then, like I say dumb banker because like there was no infrastructure, right? If you wanted to own Bitcoin, it was no small task. Like you had to really know what you were doing, and I did not. Today it's very different, right? We have tons of great, video tutorials, just wallets you can like apps that you can download on your phone or your desktop that are super sleek and easy to use. So like the infrastructure and exchanges as well, right? Like the infrastructure has come a very long way, and it's become much easier to get your hands on, actually store your keys, and tactics and understanding of how to preserve your private keys so that you don't lose your coins. All of that has come a very long way.
100%. I agree with that. My second question, Jesse, it's kind of a two-folded question. So
Sure.
The first part to this question is, what is Magic Internet Money? The second part is, how difficult was it to create a marketing campaign around your book?
Yeah, sure. So Bitcoin is Magic Internet Money. The title of the book is, it's not original to me. I didn't create that title. It was if you recall, there was a subreddit for Bitcoin. I think there's two. There's BTC and Bitcoin subreddit now, but in the old days, and I was not following as closely back then, the cover image for the Bitcoin subreddit was this like 8-bit drawing of a wizard, and it had the words Magic Internet Money, join us. And so that's where the title comes from. And if you look at the cover of my book, okay, so I'll hold this up here. I basically used that little 8-bit image and tried to really give it a serious update and add in a lot of features and richness and qualities that go along with my book. But that was the inspiration for my cover, was that original Magic Internet Money image.
Nice. I'm glad you brought that up and kind of explained that, because I think a lot of people, they really gravitate to your book just because of that title. A lot of the OG Bitcoiners are like, oh, what's this book about? Like Magic Internet Money. Like I think he's in the know. And the second part of my question is, me being a writer, me, publishing books myself, I understand the difficulty of marketing and getting your book out there to the world, especially when it comes to being like a Bitcoin only book, because, Bitcoiners can be very subjective and very picky about what they feel is a good read. So my question to you is like, how did you go about marketing this book to the world?
Yeah. So I self-published it in October of 2020. And as everyone knows, at that time, there was not a lot of travel going on, not a lot of physical presence to be had. So I wasn't going, doing book signings or book tours or anything like that. And also, I had no agent. I had no publishing house. It was just me. My marketing plan effectively was sort of Bitcoin Twitter and the Bitcoin community at large. I just was mentioning and reaching out to different Bitcoin podcasters saying, hey, I've just wrote this book. I would love to come out and talk about it. I'll send you a copy. Like, please give it a read. If you find it interesting, let me know. And my sort of marketing plan was, I needed Bitcoiners to get their eyes on it. I needed them to read it. And Bitcoiners being who they are, the, sort of don't trust, verify mantra. If my book was worthwhile and had credibility, I thought, okay, they would take it and run with it. They would help me promote it and share it. If they found it to be a valuable resource, if they found that, hey, they could recommend it to novices or intermediaries and say, hey, there's good value here. Bitcoiners will pick up on things that are, we'll call it high signal and low noise, right? So if I did the job I hoped I did in writing my book, I thought Bitcoiners would help me market the book. And that's basically what happened. I did the podcast circuit for a few months when I first launched the book, which was great. I got to meet a whole bunch of Bitcoiners that way. And then, the reviews started coming in. People loved that it had a very unique format. It had all these images. It had all kinds of analogies and sort of friendly words. It just made it stand out a little bit from the pack. So, but it wouldn't have worked if they didn't agree that it was worthwhile. And that was key.
Your book doesn't have any like additive, preservatives, anything. It's just like a straight Bitcoin book. Like there's no fancy blurb from someone in the space or forward from like Michael Saylor or anything. So it's like when I see that and then I realize like, oh, Guy Swan did the narration for your audio version. I said, okay, he's in there. Like, once you get Guy Swan on you, like it's a good place to be, especially being a Bitcoiner. And it inspired me as a writer. Like hopefully I can get Guy Swan to narrate one of my books one of these days.
Yeah, man, for sure. I have a crazy story with Guy. We actually met shortly after I published the book, met, by Zoom shortly after I published the book. And I was going through some stuff up here in Canada and I dragged my feet. We should have had that audio book out a lot sooner than it came out. But the timing ended up working out great because it came out in tandem with this re-release that I did recently with Mash, which is a company that's trying to integrate Lightning payments into basically every corner of the web. And we re-released the original manuscript of my book online where every page is available for sale for sats. So that ended up being a cool sort of little marketing push that I had just recently with it.
Speaking of Canada, my question to you is, how is the Bitcoin scene in Canada? And, I realized that there was like, the Truckers Convoy and there was some issues with people's bank accounts being frozen. Do you believe that like helped or hurt Bitcoin going through that process for Canadians?
I think that was definitely helpful for Bitcoin. When you do sort of the postmortem on what happened with funding the truckers, there were effectively three fundraising campaigns for the truckers. There was the initial, not Give, Send, Go, but the GoFundMe, which raised like $13 million. There was the original marketing campaign, which raised like $13 million that was frozen by the government. Then there was the Give, Send, Go campaign that also raised I forget, a couple $1 million, but that somehow also ended up being frozen. And then Bitcoin came in, Bitcoiners, I should say, came in and started raising funds. And there were some amazing sort of boots on the ground initiatives to get Bitcoin directly into the hands of some of the truckers. And from my understanding of it, basically we know 0% of the funds from GoFundMe were claimed by the truckers. 0% of the funds from GiveSendGo were claimed. Basically about 70% of the Bitcoin ended up being claimed. So in effect, it wasn't perfect, but it was far superior fundraising mechanism for the truckers than any of the other venues that they ended up trying. And as a result, I personally have gotten to know a lot of activists, especially over the last 2 years, in the sort of Canadian freedom movement, if you want to call it that. And when the trucker incident happened, I had been in their ear the last couple of years trying to get them to, hey guys, you might want to pay attention to Bitcoin. I know you see them devaluing the currency. You talk a lot about precious metals. That's yesterday's sound money. That's not going to be tomorrow's sound money. Here's a bunch of reasons why. Please, maybe pay attention to this. The trucker thing happened. They started calling and saying, okay, we need to try to understand this a little bit better. And, I would say interest is kind of tempered a little bit since then, but I think we're inevitably just going to face more and more incidents where Bitcoin's use case is going to shine through and the demand is going to come because it's just sort of inevitable.
Yeah, and me being on the other side of the border and just observing and seeing what's going on, it was just so insane to hear about it, and it's just good to hear from an actual Canadian that lived through it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like Tallycoin had a big role in getting money out to truckers and to the Canadians in that area as well. Bitcoin Magazine, they wrote pieces on it, and I just kind of want to hear your perspective on that portion of it too.
Yeah, when I said that 70% of the funds ended up being claimed by truckers, so Tallycoin was the mechanism by which the funds were raised. Those funds were put into, if I'm not mistaken, a multi-signature account. A couple of prominent Bitcoiners whose names probably some of your listeners would know, in addition to a Bitcoiner on the ground who's relatively unknown, sort of had these keys, and they ended up going around distributing paper wallets that could be swept and claimed. So yeah, Tallycoin was that fundraising mechanism.
Yeah, most definitely. Last question for you, Jesse, and this kind of goes back into your book. So
Sure.
In chapter 3, you talk about the history of money. Where do you see the future of money going with Bitcoin?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. There's competing futures of money narratives happening right now, right? We know that cash in the form of dollars cash is, there's an interest in phasing that out from the powers that be. There's this push for central bank digital currencies, but they seem, in my view, to be well behind the 8 ball on that. I don't think they're nearly ready to roll that out, certainly not in North America anytime soon. Cash, we actually had an incident in Canada just 3 or 4 weeks ago, I would say, where Rogers, which is one of the nation's largest telecom companies, they just went out. The lights went out at that company for a day or so. And they are the service provider for the payment rails for, I believe, the Interact network, or one of the, the Visa backend networks. And so a whole bunch of regular payment mechanisms went out with this company last month. And suddenly there was, again, this surge of interest of, hey, we need to, we can't just go phasing out paper cash. We need paper cash. So I think that caused a bit of a renewed interest in, hey, it gave an argument to not convert all the way to digital currency and to be skeptical of central bank digital currency. Because those rails are so highly concentrated, the ownership of those rails are so highly concentrated. So that's, yeah, you have the cash narrative, you have the digital cash narrative in the form of digital central bank cash. You have the precious metals narrative, which to me is that tired narrative. It's the old money. It's not meant to be the money of the future. Your question obviously is about what's the future of money. Gold, we've seen its flaws. We know why it doesn't work at scale, because it needs that trusted intermediary. You can't send zillions of transactions back and forth the way you would want in a very efficient and effective economy. So Bitcoin really just fits the bill for what we need in terms of, okay, we're going to have a lot of, digital commerce in the future. That's, if we want to have great things, we're going to need to send value back and forth to all kinds of different regions. Gold doesn't fit that bill. It has a lot of characteristics of sound money. It's not as good as Bitcoin. It's certainly better than central banks' currencies. But if we're talking about what's the most fundamentally superior money for the future, it's Bitcoin by a mile. So I see ultimately the reasons for that. People will slowly have their awakening for one reason or another, right? In Canada, it was the trucker incident that snapped a lot of people out, and it'll be different reasons at different places and different times. But it will come to Bitcoin because there's nowhere else for it to go.
What's interesting is that I used to be a gold bug, and all the things that you're saying is 100% correct. Like, gold is good, but it has verification issues. It's not portable. The percentage of it rising as a profitable asset has been pretty stagnant over the last decade. It's not really progressing as an asset. So, all the smart, sound investors are realizing that, and they're realizing that Bitcoin, a digital asset that just comes on the scene in 2009 with over 200% growth for the last decade, just makes more sense. It's just a better asset to hold on to over the long term. So I 100% agree with everything you said right there, Jesse.
Yeah, absolutely. I owned physical gold for like a little over a decade, because when I first learned about sound money in like 2007, 2008, basically in the aftermath of the global financial crisis, right as I was starting my career, I was woken up to the fact that, money is not what I thought it is. It's not, for our benefit. It is a highly concentrated lever that certain powers can pull when they want to their benefit and not to the benefit. It's not something that's equally accessible and available. It's not a flat playing field as it should be, as I thought it was. And so that's how I initially became a gold bug. And then slowly I was able to apply that knowledge along with sort of my understanding of technology as those came together, into 2017, 2018, and see that, Bitcoin is sort of this best of both worlds.
Yeah, most definitely. Jesse, this Bitcoin conversation has been great, really insightful. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Can you give the audience your social media handles, way for people to contact you, and whatever else you have going on in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me. I'm tweeting a lot at Jayberjay, Jayberjay. My website is magicbitcoinbook.com. So there's links to, the Amazon if you want to buy the paperback book. You can check out the Audible book. And also if you just want to buy literally individual pages of my book and just scan it, I think we give away a couple chapters for free. If you want to just start it off and see what it's like. To get a sense of it, you can go there as well. If you have sats, you can send sats from any Lightning wallet to a Mash wallet, so that just right on your browser, you can start scrolling through the book. So recommend giving that a try. Also, it's just a good excuse to play around with that kind of technology. But yeah, Jayberjay and magicbitcoinbook.com are the two best ways to find me.
Great. Jesse, once again, thank you for taking time to be on the Bitcoin Source. Have a good one.
Thank you so much, Daddy. Take care.
Bye.